6.5%, was it? Is that what the current odds are of the Stanley Cup?
Well, and if you look at the round-by-round progression, the Stanley Cup favorite is the Vancouver Canucks.
Like, what a time to be alive!
Talking you through every goalie controversy, scoring slump, and draft lottery bust, this is the C4 Podcast on CanucksHockeyBlog.com. Here they are, the best starting lineup we could afford under the salary cap. Chris, Matt, Anna, and Adam.
Welcome to another episode of the C4 Podcast, brought to you by CanucksHockeyBlog.com and seen or heard from on the Full Press Network. I am your co-host, Matt Lee, and you can follow me on Twitter at MattLee_61, brought to you with my very eloquent speaking, very talented co-host, I don't know, I was trying to go for something really, really grandiose, but let's just call her, she's the unparalleled Anna Forsyth at aforsyth03. Anna, how are you?
All right, thank you. I'm very flattered. What an introduction to live up to, by the way.
Yes,
yeah,
and
you really set me up.
I know, and you know what? I wish I had unparalleled before, but then, you know, my brain, it takes always that extra half second sometimes to think. But glad that you're here. Glad that you are fit to play. Not fit to play, unfit to play. Chris Golden at Light Force at home with what Anna has not called the Cocoa Pox.
Yeah, it's not the Cocoa Pops, just want to reassure everyone. But, well, I mean, he's deemed unfit to play. That's all we're saying, right? Lower body injury, upper body injury, maybe both.
I haven't come into anyone yet who's gotten sick, like not the coronavirus, Anna. But I would imagine anyone who I come into contact with that is just feeling like generally unwell, I would be very apprehensive about being around that person. I don't know if that's happened to you at any point in the last few months.
Yeah, no, actually it has. I just heard today that a co-worker who I have been sharing a pretty large office space with, really haven't come into that much contact with her, but she got sick and we got given the all clear today that she has not had the Cocoa Pox. So that was a big relief, I have to say. But it's bad timing. It's scary timing for you to get the flu or similar.
Did this coworker get tested?
Yeah.
Oh.
They've been tested twice, negative. So that is a big relief, I have to say.
I have not. I mean, I've seen video of people getting tested, and you know, no matter how many times I actually watch people get tested, it still looks very uncomfortable to me.
It really does. I mean, I've been following very closely the England cricket team, and they get tested a lot. Yeah, it doesn't look pleasant, but you know, it's got to be done in some circumstances. But it does give me the shivers just to look at it. So I hope, touch wood, I don't have to go through that. But obviously, if it's called upon to do it, I will do that. But yeah, it doesn't look nice.
Not that we enjoy seeing any of them in particular getting tested, Anna, but if you were to see one Canucks player getting tested for the coronavirus, which one do you think would have the most interesting reaction?
Well, you almost want to see the tougher players, right? And see just how well they cope with it. It might be
Roussel.
Bring Roussel.
Roussel, I think, would be very entertaining. Like, I expect the French expletives to be dropped.
Yeah, I'm sure we'd get some new language skills out of that. For sure.
The big
I know
fella,
he's not
Zach
really a Canucks
McEwen,
player.
would be good too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, maybe that.
The bigger they are,
will come out a bit.
Yeah.
Tramkin would be funny though. I know he's not a Canucks player anymore. Just like to see how such a tough guy takes it would be interesting.
My interpretation of how Tramkin would react to being tested is what it would be like if Ivan Drago were to be tested for the coronavirus. Just no reaction whatsoever.
That's from Rocky, right?
Yes, correct. Very good.
Okay. I haven't seen any of them.
Either way, Chris Golden is just feeling a little unwell today, so not fit to play for the podcast today, Anna, but that's all right because we have a lot to get into for today's episode. I just cannot believe it, and stop us if you've heard this once already, but training camp has opened for the Vancouver Canucks, and The only difference is that it's on July as opposed to September. And this is going to be, Anna, one of the most jam-packed podcasts we've had over the last few months, of course, as we get into real hockey. I cannot believe it. It is starting to get really real that hockey is making its slow but sure return. So coming up today, we'll get into all the events of training camp's day one. Among the notables, no Michael Furlan seen in today's practice. We saw the line rushes take place, and of course, we will also get into the rumors of the week last week with the discussions about Brock Boeser. All of that's coming up next on the C4 podcast on CanucksHockeyBlog.com and the Full Press Network. So, Anna, let's start with training camp and the news and notes of the day. In case you've missed all the action, Michael Furlan did not take part in today's practice. He was deemed unfit to play. I guess we better get used to that label or that moniker as it was, as the NHL takes over all injury updates for teams playing in phases 3 and 4. However, Jim Benning did meet with the media after the practice and did downplay Furlan's absence just a little bit, saying we should expect him to return at some point. Your reaction, I guess, your initial reaction to not seeing Michael Furlan in practice this morning?
Well, we've already had a heavy debate about this in Discord, and if you're not in Discord, you need to join us on there. And that's where the talk keeps going after we're done recording. But yeah, it's a strange one. I can kind of see both sides of the argument as to using that general label. Health is kind of a private thing in some ways, and they're trying to protect the player, but there's also the sense that the NHL, once again, is trying to protect themselves. Like, there's been huge debate about whether they should be playing at all. And with players continuing to test positive, like Pittsburgh have pulled 9 players voluntarily from practice due to potential secondary exposure. A bunch of Montreal players yesterday tested positive. It's not going away, right? That's a rolling story. And you kind of get the impression that they're trying to cover the bases here. And in such a scary time for fans, for media, for players, it's just hard to hear. But who knows what's happening with Michael Furlan? We don't know that that's anything to do with coronavirus or potential exposure or being careful surrounding that. It could just be being careful with his concussion.
Right, you hit the nail on the head there, is that we simply don't know what the diagnosis is or what's wrong with Michael Furlan. It could be a number of factors. It could be coronavirus related. It could be concussion related. And Furlan is simply making his way through the concussion protocol. We just don't know. Like we did mention, Jim Benning did downplay a little bit. I think he sort of used the words along the lines of that it was more safety than anything. So we do expect to see Michael Furlan return at some point. Now, that said, I think, we've talked about the status of Michael Furlan as he gets closer to playing. We've seen that he has been skating hard and that he's been working out and he's been symptom-free for some time. But like we've continuously said here on this podcast, the health of Michael Furlan remains the 100% priority here for the organization. This is a player who the Canucks invested some dollars and term into. And he's now been sidelined by 2 separate concussion incidents. So I think the priority continues to be that the team must exercise the most abundant of caution with regards to his status.
Yeah, and we've said that time and time again that we hope that they're careful, they're monitoring everything, because the last thing we want to see is him completely drop out of the game, or, like, worse still, drop out the game and have lifelong effects due to this concussion issue. So if they're being careful, that's great, and we want that to continue. I guess we'll just see when he appears and how he looks.
I think the absence of Michael Furlan was exacerbated just because of the fact that it was day one of training camp. And when you don't see Michael Furlan in the first official day of training camp, though we had seen him taking part in the phase 2 skates, certainly it gave a lot of talking fodder for a lot of people on Canucks Twitter. So I don't think anyone needs to make too much of the absence. If we continue to see the absence of Michael Furlan, perhaps a week into training camp, maybe that raises some more red flags. But I think just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean that there's necessarily an issue right now with Michael Furlan. Let's move on further down into the training camp
Sorry,
news.
one last thing, Matt,
Yes.
on Michael Fallon. I will just say, just to close it up here, that I don't think if what the NHL are trying to do by using that blanket statement is, stopping people from speculating, if anything, it makes people speculate more. So it's not like it stops any discussion. So maybe I'm not saying complete transparency is the answer, but it certainly stops any debate of what's actually happening.
Do you think the NHL should simply at least disclose if it's COVID-19 related or not?
I actually think they should, even if it's just we're taking precautions, and they don't have to necessarily say, whether he's tested positive or not, but just say, we're taking precautions on advice of health professionals in regards to this. And as long as there's an understanding with what they're doing and why, I think everyone would be slightly more understanding of that. And there's still going to be idiots that, speculate on Twitter, and there's always going to be that. But if they show how that they're doing everything right in terms of precautions they're taking, then I think that's a better stance to take.
Let's move on now to the rest of the training camp news and notes, Anna. We'll start with the lines. This is the lines that Brendan Batchelor, voice of the Vancouver Canucks play-by-play, tweeted out in no particular order. So let's just get that sort of straight right off the bat. But on one of the lines, you have Tanner Pearson with Bo Horvat and Brock Boeser. On another, you had Antoine Roussel and Louis Eriksson taking turns on a line with Adam Gaudette and Jake Virtanen on the right wing. On the other line, you had JT Miller with Elias Pettersson and Tyler Toffoli with Zach McEwen mixing in with Toffoli. And on that fourth line, Tyler Mott, Jay Beagle, and Brandon Sutter. We'll get to the defense pairings in a second here, Anna, but let's just sort of unpack the forward groups first. Friend of the show, Chris Faber, noting that Toffoli did look like he was locked in with Miller and Pettersson on line one, which leads you to believe that Zach McEwen probably that first candidate to be an extra forward, at least at first glance. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the debate about whether Boeser slots onto the first line again, or Toffoli kind of cements that spot. And it seems like Canucks are going with their second option, which I can totally see why they're doing that. Horvat and Boeser do slot in well together. I think Bess has spoken today about how their game complements each other, but again, he wouldn't say that that he preferred playing with PD. That wouldn't be a great thing to say. So, yeah, I definitely see both, and I think I definitely I can see why you want to put Toffoli that big star player on that first line, and really how you're going to see how he's going to fit into this team long term if he does, if you don't give him the best shot to do that. So I understand why they're doing that. In terms of McEwen, that's an interesting... Sorry, you go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go. Please continue.
Oh, I was just going to say with McEwen, that's an interesting one because he's very versatile, and we've seen that. Be interesting to see if he is that, fill-in up and down the lineup, or if he's just a first fill-in at the sort of bottom end of the lineup, which is where we've seen him play before. But yeah, he is versatile, so... But you do think that they'd boost Boeser if something happened to Foley, for example, rather than put McEwen into the top of the lineup. I'm sure he was just practicing with the group, but he does seem like he's one of the first to get the boost from the reserve kind of list.
Right, and so that was going to be my next point here. Louis Eriksson, on the meantime, looking like the other extra forward in this case. Again, like we mentioned, taking turns with Roussel on that Gaudette and Virtanen line. I'm pretty convinced that it would be McEwen ahead of Eriksson in that pecking order, should there be an injury into the top 12. Yes or no? You feeling the same?
I am feeling the same. I guess you've got to think that, Louis is still an NHL player, so he's kind of still in that group as opposed to the more like Comets heavy Black Aces group. So I can understand why he's practicing with them, but yeah, I do think McEwen's ahead of him.
Right. The only other line which really looked to be quite constant, I guess, was that fourth line, or what we would call the fourth line of Tyler Mott, Jay Beagle, and Brandon Sutter. I think a lot of people, both in Discord and on Twitter, have sort of penciled in Brandon Sutter into at least a right wing role, whether it be on the third line or on the fourth line. The more we sort of look into it here, and I think this is a theme that will continue to emerge throughout the training camp and perhaps into the play-in series, Anna, is maybe Sutter on that right wing spot just gives the Canucks an extra center should it come down to it in a game situation.
Yeah, I think they like to have Sutter in the lineup, but having that versatility of putting him in at right wing offers you an extra center. I mean, Mott is an extra center as well. You kind of have two extra centers there. But again, Mott and Sutter can play wing, which is great. So I think Beagle is just a natural center. I don't think he has any like wing versatility, and Beagle does have the I think added boost of face-offs. He's better at face-offs, but Sutter offers that kind of vet presence, that experience. Well, yeah, also offering you that option that should Beagle go down or anything happen, that he can slot into that center role.
The other thing that we haven't even alluded to yet is that the fact that all of Tyler Mott, Jay Beagle, and Brandon Sutter can kill penalties, whereas Zach McEwen
Right.
and Louis Eriksson generally do not. So I think that also plays a big role into whether or not Brandon Sutter slots into that right wing spot. You look at this group as a whole, Anna. Maybe I'm sort of reading too much into this, but if any of those top 12 forwards were to be a healthy scratch candidate, it might actually be Jake Virtanen, who's probably got the shakiest grip on a top 12 spot. I mean, you could easily see Zach McEwen sliding into his spot should Jake Virtanen falter.
I mean, that's a hard thing, hey, because it's not like we think, it's not your top 12 most talented players. It's, your best 12 players in their position. So, and in game situations, excuse me. So Virtanen has a lot to prove for one, but his skill set is the more easily replaceable one, I guess you'd say, because of that penalty killing skill that fourth line have. And I really hope that Virtanen does cement the spot and he plays that kind of irritating, fast skill play that I know he does have. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a tough one for him to prove for sure.
Don't get me wrong, and I mean, this, Anna, better than anyone, is that I have been quite a Jake Virtanen apologist over the years, and I'm not going to take anything away from his success that he had this season. I mean, a 20-goal pace is an improvement over last season. He wasn't healthy scratched once, but I think part of the success for Jake Virtanen this year has been the fact that Travis Green kept him on a short leash throughout the season, and I expect that whether it's a pandemic or not, that leash will continue to be short on Virtanen throughout the play-in series. So if any of those 12 forwards have a shaky grip on a spot, I think it's going to be Jake Virtanen, and I would expect that if he does indeed lose a step in his game or makes a mistake or two, Travis Green won't hesitate to put in someone like Zach McEwen, who I think has really become a bit of a favorite both among Travis Green and Jim Benning. You go back to the trade deadline when Benning had said that they were ready to see Zach McEwen become a full-time player. So it's going to be an intriguing sideline of the play, intriguing side story to watch throughout the play-in series, and that's going to be one of the things that I monitor the most.
Yeah,
Anna,
and obviously,
go ahead.
I was just going to say that depending on Furland's development and coming back, that might have an effect on our fourth line. So it's not like they're locked in there.
Yeah, totally. Let's get into the defense pairings here, Anna. Really, the only intrigue, I think, is at the bottom of the list, but let's go through the top of the defense to the bottom. You had Quinn Hughes and Chris Tanev paired together. Not much of a surprise there. Travis Green opting to have Edler and Myers skating together. And on that bottom pairing, Oscar Fantenberg and Troy Stetcher on the right side, with Jamie Benn and Jalen Chatfield serving as that fourth pairing here, Anna. I mean, I don't think anyone here is expecting too many surprises in the top four, but when we get to game one against the Minnesota Wild on August the 2nd, what do you expect that third pairing to look like?
Well, I don't want to be too reductive here, but maybe we're seeing the upshot here of Fantenberg having ice access in Sweden far earlier than a lot of the other players. Maybe that he has come on and slotted it in, and they've liked what they've seen from him. Obviously, very early days, and we could easily see that change coming to game one with Minnesota. But if he has gained a step on Ben, then great. Like, we haven't seen much between them in the season. They've both been quite a weak spot. So yeah, I think it will just be who performs better, but I think that's the main flexibility is Ben and Fantenberg. And let's not forget that the Chatfield is, along with Rafferty and Sortner, like, have really good shots too as fill-in players. So if there are any issues, any injuries, but also anyone like looking weak there, then there's a real strength there with the Black Aces to fill in.
Any sort of surprise on your part at all to see Jalen Chatfield skating with the main group and Brogan Rafferty continuing to skate alone with the Black Aces? Or is this simply a left side defenseman, right side defenseman sort of perspective here?
Well, let's not forget there's day one here, and maybe it'll change as we go along. I do think that handedness does play into it, especially when you're just trying to find these minimal gains. So handedness does play a part, but, you know, Chatfield's trustworthy. They've seen him fill in at the NHL level and perform, so, you know, he's more of a sure thing than Rafferty, who we haven't seen very much of. But yeah, I expect that to them to continue to monitor that.
Certainly, and our friends of the show at Canucks Army also reporting that, as a small aside, I guess, that Olli Juolevi was seen skating and stretching with his teammates as well. Looked to be full go, skating well. Obviously a far cry from the training camp in September, where he was laboring a little bit, had trouble getting through some of those stretching exercises. But again, Canucks Army reporting that they seem to see Juolevi skating at full speed with no sort of issues whatsoever. So maybe that continues to be a small storyline as well as we work our way through training camp, Anna. I think we both acknowledge a lot can change between day one of training camp and August 2nd. Lots has to be decided. I think that there's probably one or two spots available for the Black Aces and the 13th and 14th forwards to sort of compete for. I think what we have seen for the most part in day one of training camp, though, is likely what we're going to see, though, on August 2nd, barring any unforeseen circumstances.
Yeah, I think, honestly, that the big change will be whether Furlan comes in. That's the main thing I can see changing. The others we'll see, but yeah, that's the only one I can could see as more likely.
Fair enough. Lots to get through for training camp, but that's our sort of recap of day one as it is. Coming up next here on the F word, we're going to get into, you know what, the rumors. All that coming up next. C4 Podcast, CanucksHockeyBlog.com.
He liked to say the F word.
Oh, then get the here then. Okay, see ya.
Is going to have the F word on it.
I wish I could give you an explanation about it. I can't. You, out of here.
You said the F word, Dad.
You called me the F word.
All right, you diaper-filling piss babies.
Wow.
That was
quite the greeting.
I've seen a lot and I've heard a lot in my day, Anna, on my 31 years on Earth. I don't think I've ever heard that term before.
No, I didn't. That was an inventive insult.
That was truly one of a kind by truly one of the one of a kind media people here in Vancouver. I'm not going to attribute it to anyone in particular. I'll let you find out who it was on your own. But I guess that was the exclamation mark on what was just a bizarre, maybe I'd say 72 hours for the Vancouver Canucks fans. As on Friday afternoon, Anna, we saw the report from Matt Sakaris of TSN 1040 saying, quote, "I'm told the Canucks are exploring the possibility of trading Brock Boeser." Now, not speaking on behalf of anyone at all, Anna, there are a number of interpretations you can make when you hear about the possibility of trading Brock Boeser. It can range from anything to actively going to teams and offering up Brock Boeser's name, or it could simply be a matter of due diligence, kicking tires, putting feelers out there without specifically naming Brock Boeser. If anything, any good GM worth his salt or her salt would be at least considering the possibilities to improve their hockey club. So it could be a number of things. Now, for what it's worth, Jim Benning did come out today on Monday afternoon and said he has no intention of trading Brock Boeser, says he has not had one conversation about that possibility. Brock Boeser, for his part, saying he thought it was, quote, pretty unnecessary to see that coming out post-trade deadline, etc., as the Canucks get into training camp. Anna, what was your entire thoughts about this incredible 72 hours for Canucks Nation?
I mean, it wouldn't be Canucks Nation if we didn't take, one comment and that didn't spawn, like, a whole, like, thing of, whole, like, argument. Obviously, that's going to happen. That's Canucks, and I'm sure Matt Sakaris knew what he was doing when he said that. But, it came from somewhere. Like, Matt Sakaris isn't the type of guy to make stuff up. Mm-hmm. And although I can understand Boeser was upset by it, clearly he was upset by it if he had the conversation with Jim about it.
Frankly, I think he has the right to be upset as well.
Okay, I can understand that, but, like, if media have a source and have a story, then they're going to report it. And although, the trade deadline is passed, but, the draft is going to come up sooner rather than later. And with the news of the flat cap last week, Canucks do have an issue that they're going to have to address, along with many other clubs, don't get me wrong. But, you can understand that they're exploring all possible ways to come at that problem, right? And if Jim Benning's never had a conversation about trading Brock Boeser, then what the hell are you doing? Like, I wouldn't be trading him, don't get me wrong, but, like, you gotta come at it at every angle, I think. As you said, like, doing your due diligence, try and figure out the best approach. So yeah, I don't know. I can understand Brock Boeser being upset, but I can also understand the media having their job to do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with anything that you said. And I certainly don't think that anyone was fabricating reports or making stuff up. And in Matt Sakaris' defense, though Jim Benning went out and said he has no intention of trading Brock Boeser, it's at least worth reporting out that, it wouldn't be the first time a GM has gone back on his word. You look back a couple years, Mark Bergevin with the Montreal Canadiens said he had no intention of trading PK Subban, and weeks and months later, PK Subban was a member of the Nashville Predators. So I don't think anything is impossible. Things can certainly change, though. Jim Benning may not have had a conversation about trading Brock Boeser up to this point. That doesn't necessarily mean he's not going to have a conversation about trading Brock Boeser in the future, because, as you've mentioned, there is a flat salary cap. There are a lot of contracts that are not doing the Canucks any good services right now, and they will need to find ways to make room for the second contracts of Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes. Anna, in your mind, there's been this debate about Tyler Toffoli versus Brock Boeser, and speculation that the Canucks have come to, at least internally, put and rate Tyler Toffoli ahead of Brock Boeser. Curious, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that one.
I think it's very difficult. Tyler Toffoli is obviously a promising player, and it does seem like he's found a better fit in Vancouver than elsewhere. But we'll have to remember that it's such a small sample size of 10 games, and obviously Tyler Toffoli didn't cause or cannot be blamed for the global pandemic, so I'm sure he would have continued to thrive. But Brock Boeser has put in the work in Vancouver. Let's not forget that he had a really difficult start to his career. After a really promising time at the end of the season when he came in, he really struggled his first full season. But he's really put it together, and I just think in terms of making Canucks a winning club, Brock Boeser's obviously done a lot more. And you just don't want to get tangled up in optics, right? The Canucks being embarrassed if Tyler Toffoli walked away. Yes, you can say that was a steep price to pay, especially if nothing really happens in the postseason here. But you don't want to get caught up in sunk cost fallacy. When they traded for Tyler Toffoli, there wasn't a global pandemic. When they traded for him, they didn't have the ratified CBA with the flat salary cap. So circumstances change. So I'd love to see Tyler Toffoli back, but I don't know if it's reasonable, and I certainly don't think it should be at the price of losing Brock Boeser.
And I'm curious. Yeah. I'm curious, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. It does seem like, especially over the last few months in particular, not just last week, it has seemed like there has been a very real push from fans to consider the notion of trading Brock Boeser. And I'm wondering, in your mind, has the hate gone too far on Brock Boeser? A lot of people forget Brock Boeser was the first quote-unquote superstar to arrive in Vancouver before Elias Pettersson was here and before Quinn Hughes was here. He was an all-star in his first season with the Vancouver Canucks, was second in Calder Trophy voting behind Matt Barzal. Even in what has been a down year, Anna, his third season with the Canucks, Brock Boeser has still managed to put together 45 points in 57 games for the Vancouver Canucks in a down season. And I do think that there is something to be said that you have homegrown players like Brock Boeser versus players you've acquired in a trade like Tyler Toffoli. Has the hate in your mind gone too far on Brock Boeser among Canucks fans?
Well, I wouldn't say that there's a large sentiment of ill feeling towards him, but I do wholeheartedly agree with you that, yeah, we do forget that he was here before Quinn Hughes, he was here before Pettersson, when it didn't look quite so bright and shiny, and that it was pretty hard work for him. And I think he's been a really good player, and not to mention being a great friend to Pettersson. I think Petey would be pretty heartbroken if Brock went anywhere. But yeah, I think we shouldn't forget that for sure. That just because he he's not the best player of his rookie class. He was pretty damn close to it, and he's battled past injuries. And also, I will say that I think it's really important that you're a good person as well as a great hockey player. And Brock really is. I know I've called him boring in the past, which I do stand by, but he's a really great guy. Vanilla isn't always bad.
Yeah. Let's just put the cap on for a moment and consider the possibility of trading Brock Boeser. In my mind, Anna, the list of players who I would trade Brock Boeser for is very, very short. And I know that there's been some of those proposals out there, trading Brock Boeser back to his hometown in Minnesota, where he grew up a Wild fan, and in a move to acquire Matt Dumba in this case. For me, not really a fan. Matt Dumba's contract is just as big and as significant as Brock Boeser's. I think it just plugs one hole and creates another, really. So in my mind, it is a very small small and exclusive group of players who I would consider trading for Brock Boeser. And without naming names, for me, the conversation in a return for Brock Boeser starts with a young, promising defenseman, likely on an entry-level contract, who is cost-controlled, who can play the right side, that has some upside in a trade for Brock Boeser. And that would have to be the centerpiece, but not the only piece in a trade revolving around Brock Boeser. So those kind of players first are few and far between. So I have a hard time seeing the Canucks seriously considering trading Brock Boeser, let alone trading him at, 75, 50% of his face value just to get out from a supposed cap crunch. So for me, it is a very short list of players I would trade Brock Boeser for.
Yeah, I think you've really hit the nail on the head with that, Matt, because I'm not sure how trading Brock Boeser for Matt Dunbar, who has an extra year on his contract, slightly higher salary, and a modified NTC on 2 of those years, I'm not sure how that helps the Canucks. Yeah, I think you really want to trade him for a player that not only helps Vancouver in the future, now and into the future, but more than that, doesn't harm them. So, doesn't create issues down the line for when you're re-signing PD and when you're re-signing Quinn. So yeah, I think if there is that player that exists and they're happy, there's this deal that exists that includes that player, plus, hopefully some draft picks, then I'm listening. But yeah, I just don't think there's a realistic trade that exists that, I could see us letting Brock go for.
I'm not going to ask you to do the full exercise, Anna, but if I were to sort of rank players on this roster who I would consider most untradeable to most tradable, it would be a twosome of Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes as the most untradeable players, or at least players I would never trade. And I feel like Boeser, Horvat, JT Miller, and probably Alex Edler would be, as well as Jacob Markstrom, would probably be in that second group of players. I think Brock Boeser is still very much one of the core players. He's not, of course, as bright and shiny as Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes, who I think in most people's minds are number one centers and number one defensemen, respectively. But he is still very important, I think, to the future success of this team.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with you. Obviously, Markstrom will depend what happens with re-signing, and I think Edler, the benefit of his short-term deal is that they, can see how it goes. But right now, he's a core player, and until Canucks have some more help on the D-line, he's a core player too. So I definitely see Brock Boeser as part of that group. Honestly, after Petey and Quinn, maybe the only person I see above him is Bo. And then Markstrom is kind of there with him, signing dependent. But yeah, I think he's definitely a key part of this organization.
Last thing on Brock Boeser, worth pointing out at least, day one of training camp, Travis Green did single him out as having one of the greatest first days among all players. Thomas Strantz also mentioning Brock Boeser looked very good in 3-on-3 drills happening down low. So I guess those late days in Minnesota really paid off, Anna.
Yeah. Yeah, it turns out he wasn't just having a frat party.
It sure looked like it, though, for everyone's defense.
It really did. It really did. But, that's just what he was putting out there. That was just the social element that he was... I guess it was less fun for him to put out videos of weight training and drills and whatever. But yeah, obviously, this isn't a good... It wouldn't be a good thing if, the rumors were created just to motivate Brock. I obviously don't think that's the case. But it does seem like that he took it personally, that was even a conversation that was being had, and said, I'll show you, which he did. So, yeah, I mean, good for him. And I'm sure he's just so hyped to play against Minnesota in this play-in series here. So he'll sort of continue to have that like motivation every day.
Take a break. When we come back, we're going to get into Jack Rathbone Watch, which started at 9 a.m. this morning. The Vancouver Canucks have a 3-day window to sign what I would say is their top defensive prospect. We'll get into Jack Rathbone Watch and whether he is a quote-unquote flight risk. All that coming up next on the C4 podcast, CanucksHockeyBlog.com, and right here on the Full Press Network.
Take hitting out of the game. You can't hit anymore, so don't do it.
The unsportsmanlike conduct, I want to get an explanation on that.
No kidding.
Because how do you get suspended for unsportsmanlike conduct?
Plus interference. There's no interference there. He had the puck.
Now, Madison never ever did that before. Now, why did he do it? And that because he was mad.
Well, your early favorite for the Calder Trophy, that's for sure. Elias Pettersson, you might even say your early favorite for the Hart Trophy.
Just to get back to your question, Elias is going to play plenty. He's going to get a lot of power play time, and yeah, I'm concerned about our offense. We lost 200-point players, and we've got to find a way to score.
So, Anna, the Vancouver Canucks do have a open but very short window to sign Jack Rathbone, the defenseman from Harvard, whom the Vancouver Canucks drafted in 2017. He's eligible to sign and burn a year of his entry-level contract at some point between now and 2 p.m. on the afternoon on Wednesday. For what it's worth on Jack Rathbone, as highly touted as he has been, a great year for the Crimson. Thomas Drance reporting that he is a, quote, higher than normal flight risk. And of course, you look at some of those factors as to why. Harvard does have a history of players who have left via that free agency route. And Jack Rathbone, for his part, does have a special needs sibling who he is very much understandably close with, if he were to at least consider playing for an Eastern time zone team. So, Anna, I mean, your thoughts initially, do you think Jack Rathbone signs within this window?
I don't think there's any signs necessary that he's close. I know friend of the show, Cam Robinson, has said that he doesn't think Jack will sign in this window. I know there's been some stories that how Jack Rathbone was close with Judd Brackett. I think Judd Brackett courted him to some extent. So he was quite, happy with that, with Canucks drafting him. I mean, who knows? And I don't think we should necessarily say it's the end of the world if he doesn't sign by Wednesday. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's never signing.
Okay, so that was going to be my next point. Let's say that 3-day window does come and go. And you know what? To be fair to Jack Rathbone, there's just so much up in the air. We don't know what the status is going to be for collegiate hockey. It sounds like Harvard fall sports is not going to happen. So there's a lot that we don't know and that Jack Rathbone's camp doesn't know. But do you believe if that 3-day window comes and goes and he goes unsigned, that he's at least any sort of increased flight risk, if you will? Because there will be future windows to sign Jack Rathbone, Anna, but this seems to be a very opportune time for him to get some of that assurance from the Vancouver Canucks that they're invested in him becoming a professional hockey player. I mean, there might not be a more ideal time from the Canucks perspective to sign Rathbone than right now.
Right, and I can understand that. But we've seen in the past with Jack that hockey isn't, and like his career isn't his only priority. Obviously his family is key to that too. It's why he stayed an extra year of high school, rather than go straight to Harvard. But yeah, by all reports he is like the real deal and he's as ready as he'll ever be. But yeah, there are other considerations, not least the fact that he's at one of the best schools in the country, and if hockey doesn't work out for him and he doesn't have his degree, that's something, like, to have a complete Harvard education. But yeah, as you say, there's so much up in the air. Yeah, like then going with, I think, online tuition at Harvard for the whole year. So who's to say whether if they can't have classes, can they have sports? That doesn't seem like a great list of priorities if they do have sports and they don't have in-person classes. But yeah, I have to say it's like there's just so much unknown right now, and we should definitely take that into account. like if the window closes without him signing, that it's like, yeah, it's not as straightforward as
Right.
he doesn't want to come.
So let's say that the window comes and goes. 2 p.m. on Wednesday arrives, and he goes unsigned at that point. Anna, if you're Jim Benning, are you at least opening yourself up to the possibility of trading Jack Rathbone? If a team came calling for Jack Rathbone and offered up something of interest, would you at least consider it at this point?
I mean, we've said this, like, kind of ties into our previous discussion that it does, like, anyone, and it's pretty much tradable. But I do think they'll be doing themselves a disservice if they don't see what he can turn into. What do you think?
I mean, let me put it to you this way. No one is as high on Jack Rathbone. Well, maybe Cam Robinson is high on Jack Rathbone more than me. But let me put it to you this way. If a team came calling and asked about Jack Rathbone, and they said, we'll take Louis Eriksson's contract off your hands if you throw in Jack Rathbone. For me, I do that deal in a heartbeat.
Right.
If a team came calling and said, we'll take Brandon Sutter off your hands as long as you throw in Jack Rathbone, I would at least consider it. I think Jack Rathbone could be a very useful trade chip if he has expressed his interest not signing with the Canucks, and the Canucks are facing that cap crunch later on in the fall. So, like you said, no one is untradeable, and Jack Rathbone could become a weapon of sorts to help alleviate the cap crunch.
Sure, and yeah, we've said that before, that if Louis were to go anywhere, if Sutter were to go anywhere, would probably require sweeteners to those deals. But yeah, so I do think you listen, and getting yourself out from under contracts like that would be huge. Yeah, like, I would love to be able to see Jack Rathbone playing Canucks colors one day and just see if he's, like, can live up to the hype, but you'd be an idiot to turn down a really good trade deal just because he's, like, a hyped college player. Like, cool.
Right. So I think for me, just to summarize the Jack Rathbone discussion, my priority would be to obviously get him signed to an entry-level contract, but failing that and the 3-day window comes and goes, I'm at least more open to the idea of trading Jack Rathbone than I was before the 3-day window opened. So I'm not actively shopping him, but I'm listening to offers. Anna, a couple more quick hitters before we wrap things up here on the C4 podcast. Sven Baertschi, one of the very few NHL players who decided to opt out of the NHL's return to play. For me, I was a little surprised, but you think about it a little bit, and I wasn't so surprised. So what were your thoughts on Sven Baertschi opting not to take part in the return to play?
Yeah, I mean, even before Baertschi said anything, and he did cite family considerations when he did put out his idea that he's not going to return. But yeah, I totally understand it. You know, as a Black Ace, he's not guaranteed play. So although he would love to showcase his abilities and get a new job in the NHL, which I do think he deserves, yeah, it's a big risk. And we still don't know a lot. So yeah, I totally understand. Canucks have said that they have spoken with Sven and they understand his decision as well. So I do hope that it's the norm that people are accepting of players' decisions, especially when there's so much else to consider.
In terms of whether or not this decision moves the needle on the possibility Sven Baertschi and the Canucks agree to a mutual contract termination, it probably doesn't move very much. But this has been a very tough year for Sven Baertschi, and we've covered that at length. This is a guy who was here for all of training camp in September, not this one. Thought he had a grip on an NHL spot. The Canucks were a surprise decision to waive him, send him to Utica for the majority of the season. He had a very short stint in a recall with the Vancouver Canucks before he was sent back down again. The club thought that there might be the possibility they could trade him at the deadline. That didn't come to fruition. Baertschi has been a pretty good sport about it, but at the same time expressed his desire to be playing in the NHL, not the American Hockey League. Is there any possibility in your mind that these two sides could agree on a mutual termination if it meant Sven Berchi could sign another deal with a team who is interested in him?
I mean, sure, but there's so much else to consider there. If you were to go through mutual termination, I believe there was a long discussion on Twitter about the legalities of that, and so yeah, it's not super straightforward at all.
Not
I
to
will
mention
say,
he's owed $3.3 million, and I
not to
don't
mention
know
that.
many players who would willingly throw $3.3 million away.
Yeah, that's another part of it. As you say, like, he's behaved impeccably, but yeah, you can completely understand his frustration. And he's been dominant in the AHL. He's not an AHL player. I don't think he belongs at that level, but it's not coming right with the Canucks. Whether they've done the right thing by, keeping him down in Utica. Obviously, you don't want to keep a player that's not part of your plans in your lineup, but it just seems to have not worked out super well. Sending players down to the minors like Sam Gagner, that happened to as well, who again conducted himself very well, but it's not like Canucks got a great return from that when they shipped Sam Gagner off again. So yeah, I don't know what the answer is, honestly. But yeah, I just think it's very complicated, and I don't necessarily see the mutual termination happening.
Like most rocky relationships, it is one that is indeed complicated between Sven Berchi and the Vancouver Canucks, Anna. Just before we go, I wanted to get your thoughts on this super, super quickly, but Thomas Drance did report that it did seem likelier with the salary cap being flat for the next few seasons that Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes might be more open to taking bridge contracts, if you were. I'm very curious, and I just want you to pull numbers out of your head and tell me what you think. But what do bridge contracts for Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes look like? Both players now eligible for contract extensions, but what would you think?
I think it's just like so far from the ideal scenario, but for the Canucks. But at the same time, what do you do with a flat salary cap and a lot of JAG contracts taking up a chunk of that? Yeah, I just think that I don't see, them agreeing to a bridge deal, and by the end of that bridge deal, them being worth any less, right?
Yeah,
they're gonna just build on that value over and over again. Because right now they're getting such a bargain for those players' services. Yeah, as far as actual numbers,
give it to me.
I don't think I have like a number that makes sense. I'm just trying to do the math on what they have left. Yeah. What do they have left? When all is said and done.
It's all. I don't think it even matters what they have left. It's them accommodating the price for Pettersson and Hughes, to be honest with you, and then worrying about the rest after. I'll give you a quick number. If it's a bridge contract, even leaving a little bit of money on the table, I could see Pettersson maybe considering 2 or 3 years at $8 to $9 million each season. It's understandably a few million short, I think, of what he could get on a long-term contract. But, that extra, let's say, $2 million in cap savings for that player does help the Canucks buy some time before some of those bad contracts get taken off the books.
Exactly. But yeah, obviously with the Canucks, as I said, they're just gonna put off paying them even more later on. Mm-hmm. Right? Because their next deal would be higher.
Probably north of 12, 13 million at that point.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, unless something drastic happens between now and then. Whereas, if they were able to, if they had the freedom to lock them down to a long-term deal, you would fall somewhere in the middle, you would think, close to 10. But yeah, I guess that's the breaks. I said before, like, you can't predict a global pandemic. I mean, you could predict that cap issues were going to happen if you continue to sign mediocre players to long-term expensive contracts. But yeah, I will say that maybe we don't have a choice, and looking at 3 years, 8 million, maybe Quinn slightly below that.
Yep, fair enough.
Yeah, I think that's just the price. As you say, like, we really have to commit, like, do whatever it takes. But we might not have the freedom to go as long term as we would like.
And as we wrap things up here on the C4 podcast, I just want to say no one is happier that training camp is back on here in Vancouver than the Dad Lee, who texted me earlier last night saying, quote, "Bo just walked into the house. He just walked into the house. I was just talking to him." And I asked him,
"Wow,
are you fangirling much?" So he is very happy to see Bo Horvat back, even if it's for just a short period of time. And as we wrap things up here, you can find us on Twitter at the C4 Podcast, on Facebook at facebook.com/the C4 Podcast, and of course on the web, c4podcast.com, and check us out on Discord. It's where everything is happening right now as we work our way through training camp and get into the play-in series. You can find us at bit.ly/C4 Discord in all caps. That's bit.ly/C4 Discord in all caps. And any last thoughts before we wrap up?
No, just as you said, like, super excited for hockey to be back. You hope that it continues to, just hope that it continues and that there aren't any major issues that completely derail it, but we'll see.
Fair enough. And yeah, I echo those comments just because, you look at other professional sports leagues here in North America, Anna, Major League Baseball, the NBA, Major League Soccer, all of whom I think have had quite a few hurdles in their return to play. And I think for the most part, the NHL has done a at least decent job of keeping it as safe and secure as possible for players. Of course, a lot can change between now and the actual return to play, but I think at this point to date, the NHL has done what they can to minimize any sort of spread or anything like that. They seem to at least be transparent enough to talk about the number of tests and cases so far. So as we get closer towards August 1st, the first day of the play-in games, looking forward to seeing that storyline unfold, of course, and hopefully we'll have some games to talk about in the not too distant future. On behalf of Anna Forsyth at aforsyth03, I am Matt Lee at MattLee_61, the unfit to play Chris Golden at Lightforce, and the also unfit to play. He's been unfit to play for some time. He's been on LTIR, the Adam Ovenel Carter at Adam FOC. We're out.